And it's Ken Kraetzer for Canvas Media. We are in New York, and it is Fleet Week, and we have the first ship coming in. That is the USS Cole, and it is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Of course, famous for a tragic incident when the ship was hit, was attacked in the Middle East, and the loss of a number of sailors. And the ship was brought back, repaired, put back into service, showing the defiance of the U.S. Navy against an attack by an adversary.
Hudson was on the ship when that happened.
So great to see the USS Cole. We visited the ship a few years ago in Brooklyn on a prior visit to New York City Fleet Week, and great to see it being a regular visitor. It's going to sail north and up towards the George Washington Bridge. And then turn around, we'll probably get to see it come back. And just waiting for a number of the other ships. Look, we have a Coast Guard cutter coming in a moment. So that's the USS Cole. Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. A class of ships that the U.S. Navy has really utilized so well since their start of their construction, going back to the 1980s. I believe almost 70 have been built, and just workhorses of the U.S. Navy. So it's great to be here in Lower Manhattan, or Midtown. We were in Lower Manhattan last night for the ceremony of the American Battle Monument Commission. And we're going to see if we can focus in a little bit more on the Coast Guard cutter that's coming in. And we were just talking to Vice Admiral Lundy about this cutter. It's a fast response cutter, one that the Coast Guard is building in large numbers. I believe they're going to build 50 of these, and they're right in the middle of delivery of many of them. And we were at the commissioning for the cutter, the Sutphin, last year, named after a Coast Guard hero from the New York City area. And this ship, which they call a cutter, of course, it's about 140 feet long, and it's a little bit bigger than the ships that it replaces. But it is a Warren de-ampered, which is, we've learned the story behind it is so extraordinary, especially for those of us who've been following the story of the four chaplains and the SS Dorchester, the tragedy which happened in February 1943 in the North Atlantic in the middle of the night, when the Dorchester, carrying nearly 1,000 U.S. soldiers, civilians, going to Iceland and then making their way to the UK, was torpedoed. And Warren Pier was a mess crew member on a Coast Guard cutter that was escorting the troop ships. And when the Dorchester was torpedoed, it had minutes to survive before it would sink. They had a team, including Dampert, who jumped in the water wearing rubber suits, actually. They were trained for this. And went in the water and rescued over 100 of the civilians and soldiers that had been, and crew members of the Dorchester. So just remarkable to see this cutter named for a hero like that. The Coast Guard cutter that Dan Pier served on, tragically, just months later, hit a mine and sunk, and with the loss of all but 2 members of the crew. So we've been working in our committee, actually, to update the chaplains' monuments at Arlington National Cemetery. And the Dorchester was a ship that the 4 chaplains were lost on. They were 2 Protestant ministers, a Catholic priest, and a rabbi. And we discovered that the rabbi of the 4 chaplains was not honored at Arlington on Chaplain's Hill. And with the efforts of many, we were able to add a Jewish chaplain's monument to the existing Catholic and Protestant monuments on Chaplain's Hill. That's in Section 2. So we're just looking right now. That is the Warren D'Ampert, and so glad to see it here as part of New York City Fleet Week. It was just commissioned a month ago and is stationed up in Boston. And that was actually down at the ceremony last night at Battery Park, hosted by the United War Council, but at the monuments that were erected by the American Battle Monument Commission. So a sleek ship. They're building about 50 of these. And it's a great design. By naval standards, it's not expensive. And made by Bollinger Shipyard down in, I believe that's in Louisiana. So great to see that ship. We've got a transport ship coming up next. And it's a 2-hulled transport ship that the U.S. military has for moving numbers of troops and vehicles. So I'm going to have to check the name of this one. We visited one of these ships at Fleet Week about, I think it was in 2019, when it was docked at the Maritime College in the Bronx. And we got a chance to visit. It's actually manned by civilians, where that ship was, civilian mariners. Now we've got a number of helicopters coming by. Let's see if we can scoot up to take a look at those. Something like a helicopter flyover. I'm not sure if those were, I assume those were Navy helicopters. And we actually flew in one. We've flown on them a couple of times, but we flew in one to go out to the USS Iwo Jima at the start of Fleet Week last year. So great, beautiful day here. Just looking over at the Intrepid Pier, there were Fox News was doing their live remote there. In fact, one of our good friends from the Navy League, Captain Frank Russo, was interviewed there about 8:30, and we saw him. We couldn't hear him. We'll hear him tonight on the recording. But I'm sure he did a great job. Frank led the efforts on the commissioning 2 weeks ago, right here at the same pier, the USS Cooperstown. And now we see it. There's the flagship of New York City Fleet Week. And that is the USS Wasp, proudly sailing up the Hudson River. And see it coming out of beyond the pier. And such an inspiring day. One time I remember when I worked in Lower Manhattan, I had an office view that looked out over the Hudson River. And one day a battleship came up the river for Fleet Week. And it was so impressive. As soon as you saw the bow, you knew it was an Iowa-class battleship. And it came and it kept growing and going past, coming out from behind the building. And it was like looking at a piece of history. And so go get another look at the transport ship. That is a two-hulled design for high speed. It can take about 200 troops and land them with, it's got a helicopter landing pad on the back, and very effective. Made of aluminum, very lightweight. And so you got to look at that. So a little closer look at this amphibious logistics, distribution, troop carrying ship number 12. We'll get the name for you. See some sailors and Marines standing on the deck. And more information is available on New York City Fleet Week's website. You can see on the back of the ship, they've got a ramp so they can easily unload different types of vehicles that are held on the lower deck of the ship. And now we'll focus on USS Wasp, which has made a little maneuver. Pointing right towards our position.
I'm just pointing my phone.
Okay. Yeah.
So just a beautiful morning here for Fleet Week. Some years it's foggy, some years it has been a little rainy, but today's perfect.
Yeah.
And
that went on to the Italians. I think that's going to be on the other side.
And the Wasp, it's almost 40,000 tons. It's really the size of a World War II Essex-class carrier, but it's designed to support the Marine Corps, to take out Marines anywhere in the world they need to go with their equipment, their trucks, their tanks, their howitzers. And from the back, there's a well deck that hovercraft can leave from, taking, they're big enough to take tanks on them and take, 100 soldiers, 100 Marines at a time. And what's interesting about the Wasp is that it was rebuilt, and it's not a new ship, it's the first in the class. But it was rebuilt about 5 years ago so that it could handle the F-35 fighter planes, which are the U.S. military's state-of-the-art, fifth-generation planes. And The Wasp had its deck replaced with a harder deck that could withstand the vertical landings of the F-35 aircraft. They can take off by doing a run down the flight deck. They could take off vertically, but they don't like to use a lot of gas. But then they can land vertically, and that makes them very effective. So they can land on a deck. They don't need to have cables. And it's the same process that most of the Allies have adopted for their aircraft carriers. So the British with their new HMS Queen Elizabeth and the Prince of Wales. They have ski jumps on the front. The Wasp class does not. That'd be kind of an interesting question why the U.S. Navy hasn't gone to ski jumps. Basic idea is that it allows the plane to take off using less fuel. Certainly than doing a vertical takeoff. And allows the plane to carry slightly higher armament. But I've had a chance to sail on the Wasp a couple of times on different embarkations, so frequent visitor in the rotation of these large amphibious assault ships. They don't bring the big carriers into New York anymore. They don't bring nuclear propelled ships into New York, submarines or aircraft carriers. So the last big deck carrier that we had in New York City Fleet Week, I recall, being the USS John F. Kennedy. And my family actually visited and walked all the way up to the bridge, which is great to see. So this is the USS Wasp, named after very famous World War II aircraft carrier, fought in the early days of the war, and then a second and Essex class carrier. But it's coming in very close to shore, and we'll be docking right in front of us. We'll get a great view from right here on Pier 88 on the west side of Manhattan. And of course, you're listening to Ken Kraetzer with CamVets Media. We are covering cadets, midshipmen, the military, and veterans proudly since 2008. So just going to take a break for a moment, and you can watch the arrival of the USS Wasp to New York City Fleet Week and New York City. And we've got a New York Police Department boat sailing past.
Yeah, he said he fucking passed the phone.
Right in front of the Wasp. Police Officer Jeff Herman is the name of that boat, number 702. And here it is, USS Wasp. Amphibious assault ship. Mission is to take Marines anywhere in the world they need to go. and a launch marine aircraft between helicopters, vertical takeoff planes. And on the Wasp, I'm hoping we get to see one. I hope they brought one up left it on the deck or in the hangar, flying the F-35s made by Lockheed Martin. Biggest defense project the U.S. has conducted is building these F-35s and variations for the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. So I hope you're enjoying our coverage. See, we've got a helicopter now flying. Got helicopters all over, but keeping a close eye on 3 tugboats with a big M. I think that's from Iran. Remember when you were a little kid, the tugboats were so fascinating. I don't think they've changed much. But we're glad to see them, and the Wasp is getting very close to its pier and is going to sail right in front of us. You're going to have the best view imaginable for this arrival. And the Wasp is just getting close to the pier for the Intrepid Museum. Always great to see that. Always good to go to events on the Intrepid. And I know the Navy League had a big event there this morning. And our friends at the USO. So amazing to see. We don't see Navy ships in New York that often, except for Fleet Week. Occasionally, the Navy brings in ships for special holidays, Columbus Day and Veterans Day. And it's going to start looking really big as it gets close. Over 30,000 tons. And it has got the big number 1 on its island, as it's the first in this class of big deck amphibious assault ships. Big bow, very distinctive for this class of ships. And the Moran tug is right there with the line. It's going to pull the bow right into the inlet for this pier, 88, between the pier and the pier for the USS Intrepid. See the bow of the Wasp turn right towards us in a moment. It's the LHD number 1 hull number. They call it a hull number in the Navy. And a New York City Police Department helicopter supervising from just the top. Got a tour boat heading up the river on the far side, giving their customers a view. And 3 tugboats starting to lean the Wasp into this pier. It's going to be right in front of it. See all the sailors and Marines lining the rails. One of the great Navy traditions and Marine Corps traditions. Navy, of course, in white, and the Marine Corps in khaki shirts and blue pants. It's so good to see. One of the traditions, I don't know if we'll be able to see it from where we are, is that when the ship docks, as soon as the line reaches a pier, they'll put up a flag on the front bow called the Navy Jack, which says, "Don't tread on me." And I always enjoy watching. When I've been on the ships for these events, these moments, I've had a chance to watch that. And it is another Navy tradition. Love to see the great big American flag flying proudly from the bridge, the mast of the Wasp. Now it's actually being backed in, so the tugs are pushing the aft side of the ship towards the open Hudson, and the Moran tug in front that we can see is pulling the bow. And it's just basically going in reverse now to get into the pier. And they're going to do it very gingerly. The water looks pretty calm, but they're very aware of currents. One time I did an embarkation when the ship came into port. They waited 2 hours for the currents to be just right so they could get the ship in correctly and not hitting the pier. Or there's actually separating the pier from where the ship will be is a barge. It wasn't there for the Cooper Sound. They added it. So another element of protection for the ship. It's up against the barge, which is pretty flexible. And you can see the Moran tug in front is giving it a pretty good effort. To bring the bow of this big U.S. Navy warship into port. Another ship coming up the river behind the Wasp. 4 tugboats out now to assist the Wasp. 2 making the big push, and 2 look like they are in reserve. I'm pretty sure that's a British ship, the Scott, coming up behind us. And so really nice parade of ships right now. And you got a great vantage point. But we're just watching the USS Wasp with sailors manning the rails, being gingerly prepared to enter its pier on the west side of Manhattan. And lots of supervision, police boats, police helicopter, lots of people watching from the piers. It's a sight we don't get to see very often in New York, a U.S. Navy ship coming in. Of course, during World War II, New York City was a huge Navy town, with ships being built at the Brooklyn Navy Yard as fast as possible. Some of the most famous and biggest important ships in World War II, the battleships and aircraft carriers, were built at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And some were built on the other side of the harbor in Newark. But after World War II, Brooklyn Navy Yard was shut down. I remember some of the mothballed ships being there, lined up, waiting for dispensation to become museums or to be taken apart and scrapped. Navy built so many ships during World War II to win the fight. Interesting to see they got 2 tugs working and 2 standing by. And it could be that they use all 4 at the end. But we see a couple more ships coming up the harbor. The Scott, I believe that is the next one. Can't quite see which is the following one. It's got a pretty fancy radar. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is... Oh, we have ships from Canada and also ships from Italy this year, which is neat. We've gone to some of the Navy League conferences in Washington. You see a lot of Italian Navy officers at those events. See a tugboat pushing a barge on the far side, well distant, well over on the other side of the river. I'm surprised they don't literally shut down commercial traffic when a Navy ship is coming in. This is going to take a few minutes. And again, they're working on the currents and the tides, and they a lot of factors in navigating a 30,000-ton ship into its dock. Of course, it's interesting watching the cruise ships come in, some of which are over 100,000 tons. We may see some come in later this week. Be probably busier on the weekend. Okay, the Wasp being gently, and I emphasize gently, being assisted by a couple of tugboats. The big Block M, I believe that's Moran, and being positioned, going against the current. Obviously, the current is going south. We just got to fly over couple of U.S. Navy planes on a surveillance. So you got lots happening today. I hope you caught that a little bit on the as it approached. So you see a lot of different elements of sea services. Aviation, Vertical takeoff, helicopters. Okay, this is Ken Kraetzer back on Pier 88 as the USS Wasp is preparing to come into its berth. And just take a look at the ship passing behind the Wasp, right behind the tugboat. And it'll come out clear in a minute. Is an Italian frigate, the Virginio Fasson. F-591, a Carlo Bergani-class frigate of the Italian Navy. And launched just over 10 years ago in 2012. And 474 feet long and displaces 6,700 tons. Built by Fincantieri. And that's a company that has a partnership with the U.S. Navy to build ships. They have a facility in Wisconsin that is building a number of the littoral combat ships. So great to see the Italian frigate Virginio Fasson F-591. And home port is La Spezia, S-P-E-Z-I-A. And again, 6,700 tons, 19.7 meter beam, 64.5 feet. Deep draft, 28 feet. Speed can go 27 knots, 50 kilometers an hour, 31 miles an hour. And the U.S. Navy is about to build a new class of frigates, Constellation class frigates, and they may be not so different from this. The ship's got a very distinctive superstructure. It doesn't have a big mast like we see on the Wasp. We know on the San Antonio class amphibious assault ships, of which the New York is one, they covered up the mast with siding to reduce the ship's radar signature. See, it's got a helicopter on the back. And we traveled Italy a few years ago to do a commemoration of those lost in the battles. Just a second, we're going to. So hope you're enjoying our coverage of New York City Fleet Week. This is our 15th year. We actually got involved with, really started our media career by promoting a Memorial Day parade in Pelham, New York, where I grew up. And they were hosting sailors and Marines from New York City Fleet Week. And we sent a press release to a WVOX in New Rochelle, and they said, call us up, tell us about it. So we did a radio report, and they said call up afterwards. And they said we did, and told them how it went, what a great day it had been. And then they called us up for Flag Day in June that year. And all of a sudden we realized they were interested, and we offered to do segments about veterans, which we produced. And working with Bob Marone. One day we famously got a call from a U.S. Navy ship in the Indian Ocean. Our friend Admiral Terry McKnight. And we've been doing our radio show every Monday at 2:30 with Jack McGurk for 10 years. For going into, I'll be 14 years in November, so I'll be going into our 15th year next year. So please be able to do that. I've just got to get a photo. One moment. U.S. Navy is going to be and it's interesting to see the Wasp is sort of stopped. It's not continuing its motion towards the pier. And I believe they're just waiting for the current to be just right. I was on a ship, as I think I said earlier, on one of the embarks of one of the same class of ship, and the commanding officer waited 2 hours for the tides to be just right and the current to be just right to make it easier to get into berth. They are very particular about the conditions. They can control another Navy plane flying overhead. And so they seem to be waiting. So we'll take a look. There's another ship coming up. I believe that's the HMS Scott, which we actually visited a few years ago. It was here almost 10 years ago, maybe more than 10 years ago. My colleague, Jack McGurk, did a color guard for 3 or 4 sailors on the ship. We thought it was very unique that the British colors were marched through the town of Pelham, the scene of a Revolutionary War battle in 1776, but UK, the best of partners with the U.S. military. In fact, that's what partnerships you hear a lot about with the Navy and the military in general. And when we were at the Navy League conference in Washington in April, one of the speakers said, you know, the way to 1,000-ship Navy is through partners. And so there's tremendous coordination between the U.S. and UK and Italy, as we said, Canada, and then, of course, a RIMPAC exercise in the Pacific. I believe that's every other year. Looks like the Wasp is getting positions, getting a little closer, is making its approach. So I mentioned you see a white, almost white, ship behind the tugboat again. That is a Canadian ship. That is the CS Glace Bay, a Kingston-class coastal defense vessel. Served in the Canadian Forces, Royal Canadian Navy since 1996. Second in our class, named for the Maritime Coastal Defense Vessel Project. And the ship was commissioned in 1996 and is just under 1,000 tons, length 181 feet, draw 3.4 meters, 11 feet. I'm always glad to see the Canadian military here. And here again, the Wasp is approaching, making its... You know, as a little boy, we'd come down and watch the cruise ships dock. You know, the era of the Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, the France. So many of the great liners that were still doing competitive in the cruise industry until the 1960s. And these piers would be just jam-packed with some of the huge names of the cruise liner era, the end of the cruise liner era. I know my parents came back on the SS America from a tour of duty in Germany in the early 1950s. Now, obviously, the tide is drifting the ship downriver because the tugs are having to push pretty hard to keep the ship from drifting south. Great to see the sailors and Marines manning the rails up on top. You may see the portholes open on the bow. Those are for lines. They will swing out and also through the opening. I never realized, but those are for the lines that connect the ship to the docks. So I've already got some of the lines out, ready for the Wasp to be at the pier where they can tie it up so it's secure for the duration of its stay, which will be till they'll be leaving next Tuesday, they'll say, for through Memorial Day, and then head off back to duty. I understand the Wasp was just out at sea for a month to train and certify, keep everyone fresh with all everything that needs to be done, and certifying perhaps some of the aircraft. I see an Osprey on the back of the deck, the vertical takeoff airplane. And I'm wondering if they left an F-35 on deck or in the hangar. I'd love to see one of those up close. The most advanced fighter plane in the world, the F-35. See how big it is. It is so impressive to see the big bow of this 30,000-ton amphibious assault ship. Navy always is very particular. You call it an amphibious assault ship. I called it an aircraft carrier once, and I got a quick note back saying, no, it is an amphibious assault ship. Now it's turning. Here's some of the instructions. So I appreciate all contacts at the Navy who have helped us with New York City Fleet Week. Also, of course, from the Navy League. We've had a great opportunity to work with the Navy League on the Cooperstown commissioning last year and the Sutphin commissioning last year. Just going to get another picture. Ship being gently pushed so that works to the currents. So much seamanship goes into docking a ship. And there's a pilot on board who's trained for all the nuances of the New York City harbor. Okay, it's Ken Kraetzer. We're back. Pier side, New York, for the arrival of the USS Wasp. And we're literally under the ship. It's a new addition. I haven't seen that they have a boat that they can launch right from the side of the ship for all sorts of tasks, from ferrying crew members, officers ashore, to all sorts of defense missions, which I think is more the latter on this one. You can see one of the sailors opening up porthole, getting lines ready that will go over to those working on the pier, and it's almost in. See, one of the big gangplank will go right into that opening where the 4 crew members are there, always wearing their helmets, their head protection. And see a few more of the sailors and Marines lining the deck. Proud moment for them. They work very hard. They're at sea a long time. A lot of duty getting every piece of equipment on the ship ready to work the way it needs to when they're at sea, or perhaps even in an operational mode, launching aircraft, recovering aircraft, recovering and launching the hovercraft from the back of the ship, from the well deck. Really fascinating to see that they can open a ramp on the back of the ship and hovercraft can be launched and go to shore, deliver Marines, deliver all sorts of equipment from tanks to artillery. Interesting, it's not like a steam pipe on the side of the ship. But it's almost in. See how the portholes open so they can launch cables. But we'll keep our eye on in case you're looking for a sailor in the back. We'll be on board later. Very privileged to have an opportunity to visit. I think I've been on the ship at least 3 times before. It's a frequent guest for New York City Flea Week. So I hope you enjoy our coverage. We're delighted to do this. Again, we're Cam Vets Media. We cover cadets, midshipmen, the military, veterans. Proudly since 2008, we do a show on WVOX in New Rochelle every Monday at 2:30. And we cover Army-Navy football. A little more on the Army side, I have to admit. But we always enjoy our chances to talk with the midshipmen on the Navy football team, usually at the media day before the Army-Navy game. So this ship, it looks, like it's freshly painted. And we're just out at sea, but it looks like it's very well maintained. It's about 30 years old. But it's going to dock in just a minute. Got a police department boat out in the harbor keeping an eye on things, as they do. So much close cooperation and what jumps out at you all the time when military people and police and firemen get together is a mutual respect they have for each other, for the jobs they do. They all say the other's got the more difficult job. A couple of folks out on a platform. So USS Wasp being gingerly brought into harbor. And just want to give you a chance to see the HMS Scott, which is now sailing just behind us. And that is a British research ship. We've actually visited the Scott. And the HMS Scott is an ocean survey vessel of the Royal Navy, the only vessel of her class. And it was built and launched in 1996, 430 feet long, complement of 78. And it is a research vessel, or a survey vessel. Home port is Plymouth, England. And 131, actually 430 feet, 131 meters. You can go 21 miles an hour. And Scott is Royal Navy's only ocean survey vessel. Can remain up to sea for 300 days a year. Has a crew rotation system. Crew of 78 divided into 3 sections to keep the ship operational. And she has an auxiliary role in support of mine countermeasure. So it surveyed the Indian Ocean in 2004, and 2006 was granted the freedom of the city of Swansea and was refitted in Portsmouth. And it's been deployed to the South Atlantic and Antarctic. They're saying that the ship may be retiring. It was due to be retired in 2022, but that they said it would be extended this year. And so it's maybe its last visit to New York City for Fleet Week, the HMS Scott. And sailors from that ship marched in our parade in Pelham, and I believe they're due to participate again this year. Want to look over there at one of the other camera people, get a good view of a Moran tug. And the USS Wasp literally just above us, another helicopter going by out of aviation. See if we can get another view of some of the sailors. I'm not sure, it looks like they've retired from manning the rails. Well, I think we're going to end this segment. We hope you have enjoyed it. The arrival of New York City Fleet Week. USS Wasp, USS Cole, visitors from Canada, Italy, and the United Kingdom, and many others from the U.S. military. Annapolis has some of their training vessels coming up. And the Wasp is still just not quite in, but the sailors are coming back from. I want you to get a little look at the well deck. You can see the opening from the ship goes into its pier. So, you like this? And so Wasp is very close to being in port. So just a thrill always. You never get tired of doing this, having this opportunity. And we're so glad to bring it to you. It's another, see the size of that tugboat. How wide it is. And for not, it's almost as wide as it is long. No, not really, but you can see it's pulling a line to keep the ship away from the pier until it's ready to close in. So you can see how tight this operation is to bring the Wasp in. Looks like they end up using all four of the tugboats, trying to get the ship in. Key is to do it safely and without damaging the ship or the pier. But the water is so unpredictable. That tug is a Jonathan C. Moran. So I was right about it being from the Moran company. Tug looks a little newer than some, maybe more powerful. And boy, you need powerful tugs with these used cruise liners and container ships and fuel carrying ships. Well, I think we're going to call it. We're going to do some interviews. But thank you for watching. And again, our appreciation of the Navy and the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard for their assistance. And our thank you for your service to all of the sailors and Marines and Coast Guard members and the visitors from the Allied countries. You get a really good look at the well deck now. And that ramp can plop down. They've opened up the top part of the opening. And I've actually gone from a boat stepping onto one of those ramps. First time we did a trip to New York City Fleet Week. So anyway, so we're going to call it a morning. And this is Ken Kraetzer for CamVets Media. We cover cadets, midshipmen, the military and veterans proudly since 2008. So have a great day, and want more coverage, just look at our Twitter page at KG Kraetzer Media and on YouTube and Facebook. And the first step to get a line out didn't quite work. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.